I'm going to work a few extra problems. This equation says to solve x divided by 5 minus 7 equals 2 1/3. The first thing that I'm going to do in this problem is change this mixed number to an improper fraction. 3 times 2 gives me 6, plus 1 gives me 7/3. So 2 1/3 changed to an improper fraction is 7/3. So I have x divided by 5 minus 7 equals 2 7/3. To continue solving, to get the variable on one side by itself, let's add 7 to both sides. Adding 7 to both sides. I get x divided by 5 equals 2. Now, to add fractions, I have to get a common denominator. Now, this 7 is over 1, but in getting a common denominator, the smallest number that both 3 and 1 will go into is 3. Your common denominator always has to be at least as large as your largest denominator. Now, 3 divides into 3 one time, and 1 times 7 is 7. If your old denominator is the same as your new denominator, then you just bring the numerator over. Now, how many times does 1 divide into 3? 3 times, and 3 times 7 gives you 21. Now we have a common denominator. Write down your common denominator of 3, and 7 plus 21 gives you 28. Now, to undo the division of 5, I have to multiply both sides by 5. 5's over 1 on the left side. The 5's would cross divide out, and I end up with x is equal to 28/3 times 5 over 1. If I multiply to the side, 28 times 5, 5 times 8's 40, write my 0, bring over my 4, 5 times 2 is 10, plus 4 gives me 140. So 28 times 5 is 140, and 3 times 1 gives you 3. 3 will not divide into 140 an even number of times, so that will be our final answer. So the answer to that problem is 140/3. Looking at this next example, this is an equation that contains fractions. There's multiple ways to work an equation that contains fractions. I could multiply each term through by the least common denominator, which would be 4. I could go through and multiply each term through by 4 to eliminate the fractions. But I'm just going to keep the fractions in this problem to give us some practice with working with fractions. I see that I have variables on both sides. Let's move the variable on the right-hand side by adding x over 4. So I'm going to add x over 4 to both sides. This is like 1/4 x plus 1/4 x. Well, think about it. 1/4 plus 1/4. You're adding like terms. To add fractions, you have to have a common denominator, and we do. Write down your common denominator. 1 plus 1 gives you 2. That's 2/4 x. But actually, we could go ahead and reduce that 2/4. If you divide each one by 2, 2 divided by 2 gives you 1, and 4 divided by 2 gives you 2. So I actually end up with 1/2 x when you add these together and reduce. Plus 6 equals 7. These x divided by 4's cancel. Then isolate your variable term. Let's subtract 6 from both sides. If you subtract 6 from both sides, the 6's cancel here. I end up with 1/2 x equals 7 minus 6 gives me 1. Now, to undo the multiplication of a fraction multiplied times the variable, you will multiply both sides by the reciprocal. Multiply both sides by the reciprocal. When you multiply here, 2 times 1 is 2, 1 times 2 is 2, you end up with 1x. You can also look at this as cross-dividing. 2 divides into 2, 1. 2 divides into 2, 1. So I have 1 times 1 is 1 equals 2. 1 times 2 gives you 2. So your final answer for the second problem is x equals to 2.